Okay. You know, I was thinking about something. I've seen a lot of change with cars in my lifetime. You know, going back to, when I got my license and me and my friends started, you know, hot rodding, if you want to call it that. It was at a time when we were not too far removed from, what people call the real muscle cars in the 60s and into 1970. 1970 was the height, the peak of the muscle car era. After that, now emissions, unleaded fuel, and everything was right around the corner. Lower compression ratios, lower horsepower. A couple of them carried on into 71. Mopar left their 426 Hemi alone. Pontiac did okay. They had to drop their Ram Air series. In fact, they had a Ram Air 5 that was scheduled to come out. That was going to be even better than the Ram Air 4. But at that point already, they were having a lot of difficulty just getting the Ram Air 3 and the Ram Air 4. They were barely going to pass emissions going into 1971. So they had to drop the whole Ram Air series. They went with the HO 455, and even in 71, it was not the same HO 455 it was in 1970, where it was around 370 horse and made over 500 pound-feet of torque. Pontiacs made a lot of torque, along with Oldsmobile, along with Buick. And the Chevy big cubic inch engines, the 427s and 454s, and even the 396 in their top versions. That 455 HO could still get into a 13. And these are with automatics. And Pontiac never went gear happy. The most you got for a gear was a 355, with a turbo 400. And these cars could dip into a 13. 73, we all know about the Super Duty 455. How the fuck you get an 8.2-to-1 compression engine, to run a 13.6 and 106 miles an hour? But Pontiac did it, mainly through their heads. And Ford, the Boss 429 was gone. The Cobra Jets got detuned slightly. And, now the Cobra Jet 429, and people don't realize, it wasn't the same 428, bored out a little bit. It was a whole different engine. It was based on the tall deck 460 block. Had a longer stroke, less horsepower, less compression, but it produced more torque than the top dog Super Cobra Jet 428, Buick already, stage 1 got detuned. A lot of models started to fade away. They say, oh, good things come to an end. And I think some models that had established a very good reputation, I think a big disservice was shown to them. Instead of letting them go out with at least a little bit of a bang of what you could get out of, the mid-70s with low compression and unleaded fuel, catalytic converters, even though they weren't going to go out with a bang in horsepower and torque, they should have at least let them go away with some dignity and styling. Start with Pontiac, the GTO. It evolved into a Ventura / Nova / Olds Omega / Buick Apollo, something like that, / They took that Nova and dissected it into, a few other brands with their other makes at GM. Some ways I think GM was their own worst enemy. They got a little too big for themselves. They created too much of their own competition rather than putting all their efforts into fewer models that were better. Cadillac, Chevy, Buick, Olds, Pontiac, 5. That's a lot. Ford had Lincoln, Mercury, and Ford. Mopar, you had Chrysler, Plymouth, and Dodge. I think GM spread itself too thin, and it got to a point where now they were hurting in some areas, and they had to get rid of a couple of models. I would have liked to have seen them keep Pontiac, but they kept Buick. They got rid of Olds. Naturally, they're going to keep Chevy, and they're going to keep Cadillac. When they went to that Colonnade body style, you know, I thought it was a terrible style. Awful. The Chevelles now, something about those triangular long side rear windows, it just didn't do it for me, you know. Didn't do it for me. The GTO still retained a little bit of some kind of its original type shape in 73. And now at 74, they come out with that Grand Am. And then the Can-Am. The Can-Am is the car that the GTO should have evolved into. In my opinion, I know people are going to disagree with me, but the Can-Am is the car, and I think that was a 1 year only, if I'm not mistaken, and it had a Trans Am shaker. And you could get a 455 in it, even though it was, I believe it was like 250 horsepower. It made a decent amount of torque, like 350, 360 pound-feet. For that era, you know, that was the most you were going to get. But at least it had something that you looked at it and you could find a little bit of GTO in it. And then the 74 GTO comes out and it's that fucking Ventura hatchback with a Trans Am shaker. Big mistake. I think that was a slap in the face to the name of GTO. What were they thinking? I don't know. But it gets worse. As much as I can bash GM for making a mockery of the GTO, Ford made a mockery of the Mustang, with the Mustang 2. You know, a glorified Pinto on steroids. That was a total disgrace. They tried to dress it up with a King Cobra. You know, they had Farrah Fawcett riding around in one, and Charlie's Angels trying to hype it up a little bit. Her posing, sitting on the hood. Was it something like 140 horsepower, 302? Oh, it was a terrible car. And then they put a fucking snake on the hood, trying to copy the Trans Am Screaming Chicken. It just didn't cut it. You know, Mustang owners hated that fucking car. Fortunately, the Fox body came along, even though it was small and it was far removed from the long nose, short deck previous Mustangs. It was a vast improvement. Performance started coming back. I forget what year it was. Was it 85 or 86? Now you got a Mustang GT. Had a roller lifter cam from the factory. That was wow. When was the last time that ever happened, right? And they got better. They got better. And now the Mustang, Camaro, Z28, they were all nose to nose with each other, just a matter of what kind of styling you preferred, you know. And then I think Chrysler fucked up the most when they took two very, very good names in the muscle car era and totally destroyed their legacy with the Challenger and the Charger. Fortunately, they let the CUDA rest in peace and didn't insult it by changing into a little fucking Mitsubishi shitbox the way they did with the Challenger and the Charger. And then they went to 4 cylinders with turbos, front wheel drive. Those things were horrible. My brother had a Daytona, the 88 Dodge Daytona Shelby Z. I have to admit, for a little 4-banger, it had the 2.2 intercooled turbo, 175 horsepower. And at that time, the Trans Ams and the Z28s were 180 horsepower. And those cars were a little bit lighter, so they weren't that bad. They actually performed very well. The problem with those 2.2 intercooled turbos is you put 50,000 miles on them and you were blowing heads and head gaskets off those fucking things. They didn't last very long, you know. And they came through with a standard 4-banger, something like 90 horsepower, 80 horsepower. Then they had a regular turbo, it was something like 150 horsepower. Then they had that Turbo 2 intercooler. It was an option, top 175 horsepower. It actually ran pretty good, I have to admit. I drove it a few times. Front wheel drive, the torque steer was fucking terrible. Terrible torque steer. You know, you sidestep the clutch and lay into it, and you only got one wheel pulling in the right, on the passenger side. You had to hold on to that wheel to keep your car in the same fucking lane. You let go and you were in the next fucking lane. They were terrible, terrible torque steer. The automatics were notorious. Turbo lag. I guess turbos today were a lot better back then. And it had that pop-off valve. Once it wound up so much, it attained so much boost, it would like pop, 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 and then you had to back off a little bit, and then it would smooth out. And that pop-off valve was so you don't blow the fucking thing up, you know. It ran good for what it was, for a little four-cylinder. I know Ford had its hand at four cylinders with that SVO Mustang that turned out to be a failure. They were not a big seller. Ford also tried it with the new design Thunderbird Turbo Coupe. I believe that was a four-cylinder as well. You know, I think that's the year that Thunderbird, with that new aerodynamic pointy nose style, it kicked ass in NASCAR just due to the aerodynamics of that body. Oh, but out of all the manufacturers that fucked up, when they took cars that, you know, they should have let them rest in peace. That's the way I can put it. Should have let them rest in peace instead of insult them by trying to morph them into something that, you know, I still cringe. I remember when those Challengers and Chargers came out. Like, what the fuck are you doing to these cars? I felt the same way when I saw the 74 GTO. What the fuck? It's bad enough you're taking a Nova and you're dissecting it into every fucking brand in the GM line by a different name. Apollo, Omega, Nova, you know, Ventura. What the fuck are you doing? Even that was bad enough as far as I was concerned. Colonnade body style. A lot of shit went on in that era. Besides just a performance drop-off and performance loss. They all had their fuck-ups, but in my opinion, and I know I'm trying not to piss off you Mopar guys, but I think the biggest fuck-up of all was Chrysler when they took two real big, well-respected names that had earned a reputation, earned it with performance and styling. You know, Charger, Challenger. And they prostituted them into little fucking Mitsubishi shitboxes with four cylinders, you know what I mean? And by the way, Chrysler got in deep shit with that Shelby Z Daytona. I know they had another little, was it a little Horizon or something they called GLH? I remember hearing that stands for Goes Like Hell. They had that 2.2 intercooler. Then they had another little model that they had Shelby down the side. I bet Carroll Shelby was rolling over in his fucking grave when he saw that. And then, but they called that Daytona the Shelby Z. Well, they got sued. The following year, it was no longer Shelby Z. It was just a Shelby. Nissan had a patent, a trademark on their Z name. Remember the 300s? They had 240Z, 260Z, 280. I remember those 240Zs came out. One of my friends' uncles or something had one. It was like a pumpkin orange color, straight six with a 5-speed. It was a cool little car. You know, it was a cool little car. They got better looking, 260, 280s than the 2+2. I thought was kind of ugly. They were a little too long with a back seat. And that 300ZX came out like a low flat, like a pancake. You know, a 300 horsepower turbocharged, you know, 6-cylinder engine. You know, you didn't see many cars with 300 horsepower. You know, you're talking, you know, Ferrari and Lamborghini for that kind of horsepower in that era. You know, a pretty cool looking little car too. And then I guess when Chrysler decided to use that Z badge on that, they weren't too thrilled about it. They threatened them with a lawsuit. So that Daytona Shelby Z, it was only around for 2 years. Like 87 and 88, 89 already was just Shelby. They could no longer use that Z name. Hey, did I surprise you today by talking about this? Huh? What are your thoughts on this? But I've seen a lot through the years. You know, in my time, these cars were cheap. I bought my first car, my 67 Firebird HO 400. I bought that for $1,200. And back then, these cars were not that old, you know? And back then, guys cared about how cars looked. They took care of the bodies. They got them nice paint jobs, you know, worked on performance. And they hadn't been around for 30 years, sitting away, rusting away. They weren't getting all banged up. You could buy them relatively cheap, you know. I bought my 70 Boss 302 Mustang for $1,600. You know, I ended up with a 428 SUJ in it. My 400 HO ended up with a Super Duty 421. My last one was a 70 Trans Am. And I got that for $2,200 with a Ram Air 3. All the three of these cars, the motors were shit. They ran, but they did not run good. They had been beat on. That's the thing. These cars back then, they looked good, but a lot of them ran like shit. They had blow-by and lifters were rapid, and that's when guys would unload them and trade them in and sell them, you know. But the good thing was we didn't have to spend any money on body work and paint because they looked good. We didn't have to spend any money. The seats were not ripped up and chewed up, and it looked good. We didn't have to spend any money on any of the appearance, aesthetics, or interior comforts of the car. We could just focus on getting a better engine in that thing because that engine was fucking beat up, let me tell you. You know, transmissions were short, rear ends were knocking, going around corners. We could devote all our money into the fucking drivetrain, you know, and they were dirt cheap, you know. Today, man, I tell you, there's a time and a place for everything. I have a lot of good memories from that era. It's a whole different ball game today. No more street racing like it used to be, you know. Back then, like I said before, I say it again. All you guys with your YouTube cars, a lot of you were a fucking joke. Showing pictures of your cars, You're going to do this, you're going to do that. You guys don't do shit. Glorifying junk. Trying to persuade people, oh yeah, patina. Look at all that rust and dents and rot. Oh, is that cool or what? No, that's guys that don't want to spend a fucking dime to make their car look decent. So they want to put their piece of shit car up at the same level as guys. And there still are some guys. Fortunately, you know, I don't believe in religion, but thank God there are still enough of you guys around here that actually care about a good-looking car. So what if it doesn't run a 10 or a 9? You're in a low 14 or a mid 13 or a low 13, but this is a car that when you go down the street, people aren't thinking about how fast it goes. They care about how nice it looks. It's got a good sound. When they sit in it, they're not getting a free colonoscopy with a spring sticking up through the fucking seat because it's all chewed up and hacked up like, you know, Jabba's car and Sanford's car. So he's got blankets on the fucking seat because they're all fucked up. You know what I mean? Thank God there were still some guys that actually care about a car. You know, they're not only bragging about how fast they're going to get it to go, and the car never goes that fast. It never ends up being what their big claim is, you know. I come from a different era. I'm sure a lot of you come from the same area. We let our cars do the talking. You know, you put up or shut up. See guys on here, they've been talking for months or over a year. Oh yeah, I'll race you. I'm taking my car for a test and tune, you know, next week, and it's been over a fucking year. The car's still sitting there, and all they do is post pictures on their community talking about what they're going to do, and they never fucking do it. You know, I said, no, I'm not mad. I'm just trying to irritate these motherfuckers a little bit to let them know that not everybody's stupid. You know, put up or shut up. Get that car with a fucking track and shut the fuck up. Let your car do the talking instead of just your mouth.